Welcome to the first episode in a new series on this channel called Books to Movies, in which we analyze a fictional work through its books and screen adaptation in the form of a video essay. Today, we're talking about the classic, the horrifying, the depressing, The Exorcist. There are many special editions and revised cuts of this film, so it's hard to keep track of all of them. But you should know that when I talk about the book, I'm discussing the version that came out a few years ago for the 40th anniversary of the film, which was directed by William Friedkin and written by William Peter Blatty, who wrote the original book and won an Academy Award for the adapted screenplay of his own work. So, with a screenplay written by the guy who wrote the book the movie's based on, it can't be too different from the book, right? Well, actually, you're right. This is one rare case in which the movie is very similar to the book. And the fact that Blatty wrote both most likely is the contributing factor to that, but Friedkin no doubt had a say in it too. Although, of course, there are some things omitted from the book that didn't end up in the film for the sake of time. In fact, there are many instances in the movie that are taken from straight out of the novel. One of the earliest examples of this is when Damon Karras is in the metro station waiting for his train, and a homeless man asks him,
"Father, would you help an old altar boy? I'm a Catholic."
Dr. Klein telling Chris that Reagan has an extended vocabulary of curse words, and the iconic shot of Marion pulling up in front of the house, which became part of the original theatrical poster. There are quite a few other moments like that in the film that I'm not going to go over all of them. A significant amount of the story is taken to have the characters question what's happening to Reagan. It may seem a bit aggravating to have to go through all this when we, the reader, know what's wrong with her, but that's just it. When reading the book, we know what's happening to her because we've seen the movie, or if you haven't seen the movie or neither, and are experiencing one of them for the first time, you know that she's being possessed because the name of the story is The Exorcist, and it's just a part of the bio. We, the reader and viewer, know this, but the characters in the story don't. It's not like The Conjuring or Insidious, in which the movie's pace is as quick as a jackrabbit, and the character is experiencing some weird shit, so they jump immediately to possession or haunting. Not that those are bad movies. In fact, I like that they don't weigh us down so much with doubt that something supernatural is going on when we know it already. But you got to understand, The Exorcist does that because there wasn't already an entire horror subgenre for possession in satanic films like there is today. This amps up the realism for the viewer or reader because if we were in this sort of situation, we wouldn't jump right to, "Oh shit, this person's possessed, better call an exorcist." No. We know it doesn't work like that. We handle real world problems with real world solutions. Now, I'm not saying that no one in history has ever been possessed, but like the psychiatric side of Karras says, these things were more often than not psychosomatic, brought on by the unseen and unimaginable power of the unconscious. Likewise, if you knew a 12-year-old girl was behaving oddly, like completely opposite of her normal self, having spasms of the sort, your first intuition would be to take her to the doctor, not the priest. Now, when her normal personality is completely left and she's growing lesions on her face and sounds and smells like a demon, then it might be time to call an exorcist. This is the struggle that Chris McNeil, who's an atheist, has to face. She generally says that she believes that her daughter is being possessed. She just believes that exorcism could help because that's what all the doctors at the Behringer clinic suggest when she's run out of options. If she's not even sure of possession, then it's questionable why she fights with Karras so hard to get one. After a while, she's practically begging him, but him, the priest, isn't sure that it will do any good. I wonder how any of us would react to these occurrences in real life. As a non-believer, I know the signs of possession, or at least what I've seen from the movies, so if I saw it in a person, I just don't know if I could accept the notion that we're under the control of some demonic entity as fact. Even Roman Catholics barely believe in possession anymore, as is said in the film.
Well, the first thing, I'd have to get him into a time machine and get him back to the 16th century.
There's another line taken straight from the book, by the way. Differences. Although much of the story is the same between the novel and the film, there are some key differences that are worthy to note. That being said, most of the differences are usually just that these are generally longer scenes in the book. This is especially true for the dialogue. The main point of a conversation that was had in the book is shortened in the film so that the viewer gets the main point of it, which is commonplace in movie adaptations of books. In the beginning, in that whole drawn-out scene of Marin in Iraq, which really could have been cut from the film because it didn't serve much of a purpose to the overall story, other than introducing us very early to Father Marin. There is no statue of Pazuzu that he comes across in the novel. One important difference is Detective Kinderman's investigation into the desecration of church sites on the Georgetown campus. Even though we do see an example of this at a point in the film, and Kinderman talks briefly to Karis about it on the first time they meet, it's a major part of the book that really opens us up to the character of Kinderman and sets up his relationship with Karis. There's also a lot more of the story told in the view of Kinderman, which is absent from the movie. Also, a lot of the other early symptoms of Reagan's possession are not shown. Rather than include them, after establishing the rapings that occur in the attic and bouncing of Reagan's bed, Friedkin chooses to cut to Reagan being examined at a client's office for the first time. While I understand that Friedkin and Blatty had to speed it up, I thought a bit more development at that point would have helped rather than exposition at the doctor's office. After all, if your daughter's bed is bouncing, you don't get your daughter's physical health checked out. You get the house checked out for paranormal activity. The film takes place in what seems to be fall, when the events of the book occur from late spring to into the summer. At one point in the movie, we see Chris pass by a group of kids in Halloween costume and with leaves falling on the ground, and other scenes show it is the autumnal season. Father Karras' dream scene when he sees his mother coming up from out of the subway and him rising up is absent from the novel. Friedkin decided to include it to connect the imagery from Iraq with the established shots of ascending. The infamous spider walk scene is different between the two mediums. In the book, Reagan is creeping up behind Sharon when she's talking to Chris in the study, but in the film, she's descending the staircase in what is a truly horrifying shot. The whole thing with Willie and Carl's daughter, who is a drug addict living in D.C., and she is kept a secret from Willie by Carl, but Kinderman finds out when investigating him for the murder of Dennings, isn't in the film. And frankly, I'm glad for it. That little arc, if you can call it that, was a minuscule part of the novel that really had no other role than add a little bit of drama and story and give an alibi for Carl. There's a lot more of Demon Reagan throwing up on people and rolling her eyes so you can see the whites in the novel. During the actual exorcism, the bed floats about 4 feet up in the air, astonishing Karras, but only in the film does Reagan actually levitate off her bed. And at the very end, when Karras commits suicide to vanquish Pazuzu, in the film, Kinderman shows up at the house right as it happens, whereas in the book, he finds out about it a little later, and knows what happened, but doesn't blame Reagan for it, so his investigation into the Dennings murder ends there. On tonal differences, there is quite a degree of differentiation there. The book, although frightening in its own regard, is nowhere near as scary as the movie. Instead, it scares the reader with the ever-darkening atmosphere the characters are faced with as the story progresses. This is much the same in the film, but it aims to scare us with its special effects and precise scary moments. It's been renowned as the scariest movie ever made by multiple publications, and I can't say if that's completely true because I haven't seen every scary movie, but it certainly is up there, and that's due in part to the utter feeling of hopelessness that's instilled in the audience. We feel that way because the characters feel it, and we're seeing the story develop through them. When I think about what is able to really horrify a viewer of a horror movie, it's not the cheap jump scares of today that induce quick shocks, but rather a much more concise appeal to emotions, because at the end of the day, horror films are emotional films. They're meant to scare a viewer, but however they do it is up to the crew, and The Exorcist is very much the dread and depressiveness that the story encapsulates. Not only is it scary, it's sad. And as someone who's read the book, in which you get to spend a lot more time with these characters, that becomes even more visible. Everyone in this story is struggling with something beyond the main problem, which is Reagan's possession, and I think that's why so many people respect William Peter Blatty for this work, because the way he manages to blend both the supernatural with everyday human issues is applaudable. Now we'll be discussing themes found in both the novel and film, and how each decides to express them. Perhaps the biggest theme is the power of maternal love, a thing that you see in a lot of dramas nowadays, but if done well, it can be truly emotional. And Blatty's treatment of it enables his work to achieve a powerful effect on its audience. I can't imagine being a mother and being able to read or watch this, because it would just be so difficult, and a lot of that is due in part to Ellen Bernstein's amazing portrayal of Chris. You're witnessing a mother who's going through a literal nightmare. Imagine being a mother and your daughter is experiencing some sort of sickness, but no matter how much time and money you spend on doctors, you still don't know what it is or how to help her. Again, that's where the real hopelessness and anxiety comes into play, because we've all had to experience something along those lines before, in which we knew a loved one who had some sort of illness and you tear yourself up inside because it breaks you to see them like that. Or you yourself are the one suffering from something, whether that be cancer or any other kind of illness. And that's what The Exorcist is really an allegory for. I don't know if William Peter Blatty really believes in demonic possession. I just know that he believes in the power of faith and how it can spiritually save people from the darkest of situations. And that brings us to the other big theme of the story, finding faith in darkness. Although we might categorize The Exorcist in the genre of satanic films because the topic is that of the devil or demons, you can't deny that this is a deeply religious, deeply Christian story, and is undoubtedly Blatty's biggest testament to his faith. He's a lifelong Catholic, and you can see that throughout, it pervades his work at every level. I'm a non-religious person, and this is scary for me. Seeing this film for the first time in 1973 must have been absolutely terrifying for Christian audiences, because at this point in the 70s, yeah, there have been plenty of scary horror films, but none really captured horror and were able to play with people's beliefs quite like this. 40 years ago, there could have been many hardcore Christians watching this who still believed in the literal devil. But enough of me explaining why this film was such a cultural kick in the teeth. Let's get back to the theme of faith, which seems to be something everyone in the story struggles with, except for Father Merrin. I'll save the very specifics for each individual character during the character analyses, but I'll be brief with this, in that the story shows how we lose our faith or any sense of hope when we're going through a dark period, and I can attest to that. But in the end, sometimes we realize that it is the faith or hope that we lost which is the only thing that can really bring us back from out of the dark and back into the light. Both Father Karras and Chris McNeil are prime examples of this. The likewise theme of God triumphing over Satan is pretty prevalent throughout, but it's more of a good versus evil paradox, like, why do bad things happen to good people? Is the devil alive and responsible for all evil, or is the world really that screwed up? It raises a lot of questions on human behavior, but also our interaction with ideology and the nature of the world itself. In the novel, at the very end, after both Karras and Merrin are dead and Regan is back to normal, Father Dyer asks Chris what thoughts she's derived from the whole experience, wondering if she should settle some faith. She responds, well, like you say, as far as God goes, I am a non-believer. Still am. But when it comes to the devil, well, that's something else. I could buy that. I do, in fact. I do. Alright, let's go a little bit forward. You come to God and you have to figure out if there is one. And then he must need 1,000,000 years sleep every night, or else he seems to get irritable. You know what I mean? He never talks, but the devil keeps advertising, Father. The devil does a lot of commercials, to which Father Dyer reminds her of all the good in the world, and by her logic, if the devil is responsible for all the bad, then there must be a God responsible for all the good. But she does have a point. The devil, or rather evil itself, does a lot of letting himself invade our lives, tempting us to admit the hardship and the awfulness. The good is less clear. It's what you expect out of life, but you don't always get it. And I think that's where the devil advertises his statement. And for all the terrible things to happen, like the Holocaust or genocide, then if there is a God and he is indeed good, then he must be asleep to let all that happen to us. It is an argument many people use to refute religion or the idea that they should have any belief. Both Friedkin and Blatty have said when viewing the film, the viewer will take away what they come in with. Meaning, if you believe the world is a cruel and dark place, then you watch this film about a harmless girl being turned into a monster, then you'll feel validated. If you go in believing that there is some hope in the world, and that good will always triumph over evil, then you'll come out still believing that. That's what I like about the film. There's so much to absorb from it, but ultimately, it's what you want to see. Christian ideology isn't being stuffed down your throat. You're being presented by many complex thoughts. And really, you're the one who decides what to make of all of it and interpret what you just saw. Allegories. There are definitely some allegories, many of them biblical, that I picked out from which I think are worthy to note. The first, I suppose, is the act of the archangel Lucifer falling down from heaven, and how that relates to Regan's fall from being a cute innocent preteen girl to, well, quite literally a demon. Also, I would be dead if I didn't mention a comparison between Regan and Eve, who both start out innocent and pure creatures, but something goes wrong and forces them out of that divine haven of goodness. For Eve, it's of course her taking from the forbidden tree, albeit a voluntary action, although influenced by that slippery serpent that is temptation. With Regan, she doesn't really do anything wrong. I mean, you can't really do anything bad enough to elicit a demon possessing you, but yeah, it's pretty awful. I didn't mention in the themes because I thought it wasn't big enough and didn't quite fit in line with the other ones is the turbulence of adolescence. There's a very precise reason why Regan is placed at the age of 12, and not younger, like elementary school age or older. She is a preteen who is about to experience the shocking moments and development of puberty, a time when a girl can finally lose her pureness, just like Carrie's mother. Yes, that's right, I'm saying that demonic possession in this story is meant to represent puberty and the transition to adulthood. Just think about it. In the beginning, with little character introduction, we get to the real Regan. She seems a little young for her age, rather calling her by her pet name Rags, having an imaginary friend, and just the general way she is towards her mother. She just seems like a perfect little angel. But once she's possessed, that quickly changes, with her having violent outbursts and launching streams of foul obscenities at authority figures, which is actually not uncommon behavior for moody teenagers.
I killed them. I killed them all.
On to the characterizations. First off is the main character's story, Chris McNeil, who in this film is played brilliantly in an Oscar-nominated performance by Ellen Bernstein. Although there's a lot of emotional trauma experienced by everybody, Chris is, in my opinion, the one who suffers the most. Not only is her very role as a mother being tested, but unlike Karis, she doesn't have any faith to fall back on. She just has uncertainty and fear, which increasingly weighs her down, and the sense of hopelessness is just so radiant that even the reader or watcher experiences it. It's the reason why The Exorcist is one of the most emotional horror movies ever, because Blatty combines all these other emotions such as dread and guilt that contribute to an overall very disturbing aura that commands fear from its audience. The other main character is Father Karras, played by Jason Miller, in another Oscar-nominated role, and I think this one truly should have won. I mean, wow. If you think Ellen did a great job in pulling off the emotional turmoil of her character, just look at Miller. And what makes this even more impressive is the fact that Karras is, without a doubt, the most complex character in this work. I could really do a 40-minute video on just this character, but I won't do, so I'll have to manage to condense it within this video. There's so many feelings you get from watching Karras, most of them sad, because he's really going through a tough time in the story. He has to suffer through the grief of losing his mother, and how he feels guilty for her dying alone. There's also the depression that's crippling him throughout, and this whole possession thing over a young girl definitely adds to it. At one point, towards the beginning of the film, he even says, "I think I've lost my faith," which for someone like him, a priest, is deeply saddening to see. It's almost as if he's lost his purpose in life, or he's allowed dread to fully consume him until everything inside, including belief, is gone. This may be why, during most of the time he's being consulted by Chris about exorcism, he's very reluctant to believe the exorcism is going on or admit that an exorcism would help. Ultimately, he does, but in the book, even at the very end, it's not really known if he believes or not. This is different from the film, in which we can tell by how he talks to Marin that he does believe. It's really sad when we see his bloody, mangled body thrown down at the bottom of the steps. We get a little emotional besides Father Dyer, but we know it's a new beginning, in a way, because in one move, he ended both his and Regan's misery, and cast Pazuzu out. Detective Kinderman is another easy character to grasp and relate to, especially for all his cinephiles. You can kind of tell that people don't want to hang out with him because he's a cop, but he's a kind guy that you root for in an investigation, but at the same time, you don't, because the reader knows that it's possessed Regan who's responsible for the Denny's murder and the church desecrations, but it's not really her fault, so it is relieving to hear Kinderman state that at the end. There are differences between his book and movie personas though. In the novel, he's more serious and is quick to get through interviews, as he doesn't want to bother people. But in the film, he's quite a bit more relaxed, comfortable, and takes his time when discussing serious matters with the other characters. And I've always thought that he brings an interesting side to his relationship with Karras, who finds him kind of annoying and avoids him at times. But Kinderman is able to gravitate towards him pretty easily, wanting to develop some kind of friendship to a degree, while still remaining professional. And hats off to Linda Blair in what is an incredible performance for such a young actor. If she wasn't great, let alone good in her performance, then this film wouldn't be half of what it is. Part of what makes this whole thing so believable is how real of a demon-possessed girl she makes. Sure, her portrayal of Demon Regan is sort of over the top at times, but people praise Robert Englund's over-the-top performance of Freddy Krueger, and it's not as if she's like that all the time. She does a really good job of playing Regan at all levels. At the very beginning, when she's a playful young girl, to the parts when she's emerging further into darkness. Although it's not surprising that this film is the high point of her career, it is disappointing that her career never really took off beyond this, and she just starred in many bad horror flicks. Father Lancaster Marin, played by Seminole royalty Max von Sydow, in yet another Oscar-worthy role, is the titular character of the story even though he isn't in much of it. He's our last resort, and because of that he symbolizes faith in all that is good. By the time he comes around, all the other characters have adopted despair because they've been in such bad spirits for so long, which makes him the epitome of optimism, at least on the surface, a breath of fresh air. It's perhaps worthy to note that in the novel, he's the only one who truly believes that Regan is being possessed, and that's because he knows. He's done battle with Pazuzu before, and he knows that it won't be the last time. If this film were made today, there's no doubt it would be significantly less loyal to its source material. It would probably be Marin going around the world fighting demons like some badass priest, which he certainly is in this, but there's also the wise old sage feature in him that is really central to the character, and Sydow brings it full force with his portrayal. The reader/viewer just feels very safe around this old man, who seems gentle yet powerful at the same time. And now time for the inevitable question. Which is better, the book or the movie? This is a difficult question to answer because they're both so similar, and they're both so great, and I honestly like them equally, so I'm calling a tie on this one. Having read the Exorcist novel, and then gone back to watch the film, has really made me appreciate it even more as an incredibly meaningful horror movie that still stands up very well today, even after more than 4 decades later. I would definitely be open to doing an analytical review of it one day. That pretty much concludes this episode of Books to Movies. There are way more of these on the way, so stay tuned by subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in your nightmares. Bye.